Sarah had always felt safe in her apartment, nestled in the heart of the city. It was small, quiet, a place of refuge from the world outside. But recently, things had begun to change. At first, it was the odd sensation that someone was standing just behind her. She would turn around, heart pounding, only to find nothing. Nothing but the air thick with an inexplicable tension. But it didn't stop there. One night, as she lay in bed, the walls seemed to breathe, gently exhaling like an entity of its own. Sarah pressed her ear against the cold plaster, her mind swimming with doubt. It's just the building settling, she told herself. But then she heard it, a soft whisper, just beneath the hum of the city outside.
Sarah.
She froze. Her name, faint and chilling like a memory she couldn't place. She scrambled out of bed, her pulse racing. The apartment was dark save for the flickering light of her bedside lamp. She checked every room. Nothing. The whispering grew louder, and this time, she swore it came from the walls themselves. A low, blithering hiss. Something inside was waiting for her to listen. Part 2. The vanishing echo. The whispers were relentless. Every night they crept in. Sarah tried to ignore them, tried to bury herself under blankets and escape the feeling that the walls were slowly closing in. But sleep became impossible. The air felt thick, as if the walls were pressing against her skin, tightening their grip around her. Her friends noticed her growing unease. "You look different," they said, eyes full of concern. Her skin had grown pale, her eyes sunken. But it wasn't just the physical toll. It was the creeping paranoia, the sensation that she was losing herself. Every morning she awoke, with new marks on her body, scratches that seemed to come from nowhere. One evening, after weeks of sleepless nights, Sarah decided to confront it. She stood before the wall in her living room, eyes wild with exhaustion, trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. "If you want me, show yourself," she screamed into the cold darkness. For a moment there was silence. The room felt impossibly still. Then the whisper returned, but this time it wasn't in the wall, it was behind her. Part 3. The forgotten name. Her body froze, every instinct screaming at her to run. Slowly, she turned to face the voice. In the reflection of the mirror across the room, a figure stood. It was her, but not quite. The figure's eyes were hollow, its lips moving, but its voice coming from somewhere deeper, somewhere darker. It whispered, its voice not hers, but something older, something hollow. She stumbled backward, her breath catching in her throat. The figure in the mirror twisted and contorted, its face warping, like an old photograph burning at the edges. "The real Sarah," screamed, her voice echoing in the apartment. But no sound came from her mouth, only the thing in the mirror. It smiled at her, a twisted, mocking grin. The figure in the reflection spoke again, but the words weren't her own. "Do you remember who you are?" Terror coursed through her veins. She didn't know how long she had stood there, staring into the depths of her own madness. But when she blinked, the reflection was gone. Sarah looked around, her heart pounding in her chest. The walls whispered her name once more. And this time, she couldn't escape. Part 4. The hollow echo. Sarah's mind unraveled as days stretched into an endless nightmare. The apartment had become her prison, the walls closing in on her, suffocating her thoughts. Her reflection no longer resembled the person she remembered. Her own face seemed alien, a stranger who watched her with eyes that weren't her own. Do it? Sarah took a knife, the cold steel trembling in her hand. She approached the mirror, her reflection still distorting in front of her. "Who am I?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The reflection smiled again. "You were never Sarah," whispered. The walls shook. The whispers rose to a deafening roar. With one final, desperate cry, Sarah plunged the knife into the mirror, but it didn't shatter. Instead, the wall behind her began to bleed. The blood pooled at her feet, dark and thick as the whispers grew louder, demanding to be heard. As the apartment swallowed her whole, Sarah's final thought was a chilling one. Who then am I?